What's up, you guys? Sean Ross Sapp. Welcome back to Fightful Studios, where I give you a little behind the scenes of covering pro wrestling and maybe some insight on some particular subjects that come up, including one that, I've been explaining pretty often on Twitter. And it's a video I didn't think I would need to make because I thought it was more commonly known and understood than I guess it is, and that is what creative control is within the world of professional wrestling. Specifically, there are a number of fans that have confused creative input compared to creative control. You might ask, why have we seen this? Well, specifically, it's been talking points regarding Mercedes Mone, Becky Lynch, Rhea Ripley, a disproportionate number of women who get the Becky Hogan, Mercedes Hogan, Rhea Hogan tag put on them when they get a sustained push, quite frankly. And that's a completely separate point for a different day, the disparity between men and women that get that tag. But I've realized that there are a lot of fans that never really knew the difference between creative input and creative control because, quite frankly, it hasn't been a thing in pro wrestling in quite some time, that being creative control. Creative input in WWE is significantly more common than it was just a few years ago because Vince McMahon is gone, and whatever Vince McMahon wanted to do, he did. In AEW, creative input has always been a thing. Quite frankly, in any wrestling company, creative input should be a thing because you're dealing with creators. They have a vision for what they can perform, what they can execute, and what's best for their character. Now, sometimes that leads to disagreements. Sometimes that leads to people not liking the way that they're booked. But that's not creative control. To the best of my knowledge, nobody has creative control in WWE, TNA, AEW, New Japan, MLW, anything like that. Creative control is contractual. Hulk Hogan had creative control. That's where "that doesn't work for me, brother" came about. He had it in WCW. He had it in TNA. There's speculation that he had it in his 05-06 run with WWE, which led to Shawn Michaels turning heel, which led to him beating Shawn Michaels and Randy Orton at a period of which he probably should have put those guys over, but that wasn't it. There were some times in WCW where creative situations would certainly go his way, and he claims that he never used it. Eric Bischoff sort of agreed with that and said, well, he only used it once, but creative control is contractual, and by contractual, I mean whatever you say the creative is, that has to go from a contractual legal standpoint, or else the company that signed you to that contract is at risk of a lawsuit for breach, which is what happened with Hulk Hogan after WCW bashed the beach 1999 when he was swerved on a storyline and wasn't in on it, sued the company, ended up getting a good settlement out of it. That doesn't exist in today's WWE, AEW, TNA contracts. It just doesn't. It's not a realistic thing. It happened in TNA with Hulk Hogan. Jeff Jarrett has spoken about that. That's why Hulk Hogan was on every single TV show, because he had the creative control to execute that. Now, even if Hulk Hogan should be taken at face value, and he shouldn't, the looming threat of creative control, especially from a legal standpoint, certainly can make the ball bounce in your way a little bit more than it would if you didn't have that. And I say a little bit, a lot. It's a lot. Because a lot of times the booker, the promoter, whoever's setting up whatever it is they need to set up from a creative standpoint probably is not going to want to deal with the looming threat of what might happen if you go against what they do. Arn Anderson spoke about that on his podcast. He said, nobody had it before, nobody's had it since, which is sort of true. Bret Hart had reasonable creative control, but as with anything in pro wrestling, reasonable can be pretty subjective, right? What he deemed as reasonable was not losing to Shawn Michaels in his home country and dropping the title on his way out of WWF. However, Vince McMahon, Shawn Michaels, others involved didn't see that as reasonable, and they set up the Montreal Screwjob. So we've got one situation that led to the Montreal Screwjob and another that led to a lawsuit between WCW and Hulk Hogan. That's 0 for 2 in creative control. Not good. Doesn't work. And I can't see why any promoter would look at that and say, yeah, that's something I want to get back in business with. What you're seeing with Rhea Ripley, Mercedes Moné, Becky Lynch is a push. That's it, a push. Sometimes in pro wrestling, some of the best performers, or even some of the not best performers, win lots of matches because they need to push that talent for something significant. You know, like a world championship match at your biggest North American show in history, All In. I know that a lot of people that grew up on Vince McMahon's most recent WWE, like his latter years, his 50-50 booking, his got to get your heat back after a loss booking, never quite saw somebody get pushed to the moon like that. They win for a year straight, win big matches consistently. But that's what's happening. That's the long and short of what's happening is you're seeing a significant push. Now, you might say, yeah, but what about that creative input thing you talked about earlier? Now, of course, there are going to be wrestlers that push to win their own matches. They're going to push for other people to win matches. But I think there are some important points here, especially as it pertains to the subject at hand, Mercedes Moné. Mercedes did a street journalism interview. And by that, I mean somebody walked up to her on the street with their phone, put it in their face like that, sold it to TMZ, and asked her about the creative process. And she herself claimed that she had creative control, but worked directly with Tony Khan. After this, I asked AEW, I asked Tony specifically, and I was straight up told nobody in AEW has creative control or will ever have creative control. And it was outlined to me that was likely in character or just misspoke. Now, as somebody who's covered probably hundreds of Mercedes interviews, that's pretty common. She's going to do things to rile people up. She's going to be very smart about creating that buzz. Any buzz for her is good buzz because she plays off of it very well. She does a literal CEO character. She had the TBS title over her shoulder while she did that. But there are some definite points that we have reported on that refute the idea of her having creative control. For example, Fightful Select had reported that Mercedes wanted the Renegade Sisters with her on TV. This was a number of months ago. Number of months before I'm filming this. Looked like it was going to happen a number of times, but it hasn't. If Mercedes had creative control, specifically within that contract, that would have to happen. That would be something creatively for her character that would be mandated to happen. It just hasn't. I've never heard that she's refused to put anybody over. In fact, I was told that she's never been approached in AEW about losing to anybody because that's not been the creative direction. They're building for Toni Storm at All In. I was told that she would have been more than open to lose to people in AEW. In fact, when she got injured in her match with Willow Nightingale in New Japan, it was Mercedes who called an audible, which is a rarity in New Japan, because she realized she was not going to be able to wrestle for quite some time. There's been nothing to ever indicate that she is hesitant to take a loss or anything like that. But I'll answer some of the common questions that get thrown my way. They said, oh, well, look at her winning all of these titles in all of these companies. Mercedes does not have contracts with those companies. Those companies want to put those titles on her. She doesn't have any say over that or the creative elements of that. She doesn't have a contract with them to have creative control. Now, there are plenty of people who work the independent circuit and they say, well, I'm not able to lose because I'm contracted to this company, so on and so forth. We don't have access to those conversations, but everybody that I've spoken to that has booked her has said that it's never been an issue because, again, they hadn't approached her to lose. Then there's one about the Beast Mortos, who is her significant other. They are public in their relationship, and he had a main event on Dynamite in Mexico and then followed it up with a main event on Dynamite against Hangman Page. A lot of people said, oh, well, she's using that creative control in order to get her boyfriend in the main event. And I'm like, what's more likely? That Claudio Castagnoli, who was advertised for that match, asked for personal time off, and AEW wanted to deliver in a big way for that Mexico crowd by bringing them someone who hadn't appeared in Arena Mexico in 14 years? Or is it more likely that Mercedes just demanded that the Beast Mortos be put into this Death Riders match that didn't quite make sense otherwise, and everybody just shut up about it and stayed quiet about it while Claudio got booted from the match. That's not plausible. That's not realistic. There are a number of other situations and questions that have been thrown my way. Somebody said, oh, well, Cope Edge clearly has it in AEW. Nope, he doesn't have creative control. What about Miro and Malachi refusing to lose to people and being hard to work with? That's not creative control. Sorry, I mean, you can't force somebody to do things. I saw someone say, what about Stone Cold Steve Austin? He didn't like the creative and he walked out. Well, you don't have to do the creative. You're not a prisoner. You can leave anytime you want. You can refuse the creative. It just won't bode well for business. If Stone Cold Steve Austin had creative control, they wouldn't have been able to do the Brock Lesnar Steve Austin match on Raw. They would have had to have moved it to the pay-per-view like he said, and the creative would have had to have unfolded like he said, as long as Brock was a willing participant. Then there were people that said, well, clearly The Rock has creative control. The Rock was slated for the WrestleMania 40 main event, and then it changed to where he wouldn't be in the WrestleMania 40 main event. So if he's got creative control, it's the least effective creative control I've ever seen. Now, as I film this, it's the week before All In. I'm going to ask about this publicly and on the record in the media, either before or after All In. I've already asked privately. I was given the answer that I was given. Nobody in AEW has creative control. Nobody will. But I was confused as to why so many people believe that if Mercedes did have creative control, why wouldn't we just report it? That's a far more interesting story than her not. That would sell us a lot more subscriptions than us reporting that she didn't. I know there are very strange people that say on any given week, you're in this company's pocket, you're in that company's pocket, etc. I am in the pocket of Fightful, and I'm in the business of selling subscriptions, getting you all to leave a little thumbs up and comment on this video, all that. That's where my allegiances lie. Mercedes having creative control would be a far more fascinating story with a lot more mileage than her not. So I hope this helped out. The difference between creative input and creative control. I hope this explanation worked for you, brother. Let us know what you want us to cover next. Until next time, we are out.